Welcome to all of our ISM members and guests to today's program hosted by ISM New Jersey. Our speaker today is Jane Tierney, who will be speaking on resilient supply chains, as everybody can see from the first slide. Please be sure to ask questions using our chat or Q&A function. We're going to be doing the questions at the end. So please, as you think of something, just put it in the chat and then we'll get to it at the end of the program. We will be recording this presentation and we will be sending the link out to everyone a little bit later today with your continuing educational credit. Now on to today's presentation, a little bit about Jane. Jane is the founder of her company called purplelink, sharing with clients a better way to obtain value through the supply chain. Jane is an engineer. She has an MBA, Green Belt, CPSM, and CPSD certifications. In addition to running her business, she also teaches operations and supply chain management courses in the California State University system and serves on the advisory board for the Operations and Supply Chain Management program. Jane is a speaker, author, and she offers a dynamic dialogue webinar. I believe it's either twice a month or monthly
monthly right now.
Monthly right now. So it's a monthly webinar program that she does in addition to all of her other speaking engagements. And she conducts numerous workshops on a variety of topics. So at this point, I'm going to turn the program over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, ISM, and thanks everyone for attending. I'm happy to be here today to talk about resilience in supply chain. It's a word that we hear a lot about. And it's something that is kind of one of those ephemeral things. It's hard to define. Everybody wants one, but when you say, how do I get there? People say, I'm not quite sure. We could try this, we could try that, we could try something else. So we'll see. But we're going to talk about that today. So as Kathy said, I am a practicing person in supply chain. I've been in the supply chain business for a while, started my career as a manufacturing engineer. So I'm happy around factories, in and out of factories, have an MBA, which has helped me a lot in Green Belt certificate, as well as CPSM and CPSD. I have a Scrum certification, and I'm also a certified instructor for CPSM and CPSD courses. So I can help you get those certifications if you're interested in that. What I really like to focus on with my clients is, assurance of supply, process improvements, reducing their cost, their inventory to scrap and waste, looking at metrics and KPIs and OKRs, which are objectives and key results, something that John Doerr put in his Measure What Matters book, interesting book. Lean and Six Sigma, I also do some workshops on that, putting together a sustainability one for the spring, looking at spend analysis, supplier management, and supplier risk and relationships. All of these things are in my portfolio. So today we're going to talk about resilience, what resilience is, what it isn't. Look at it in the supply chain context. I have a couple of 4 pillars of resilience, and then different aspects, 5 aspects of that are important, looking at resilience building and how you actually build a more resilient supply chain. We'll take a quick look at the benefits of this, and then I'm going to give away some prizes. So if you want to be included in this, the prize drawing, or if you'd like to get a copy of these slides, you can email me now at jane@purplelink.co, and I'm going to put that in the chat right now. So you can email me, just put ISM or ISM webinar in the subject. You don't have to put anything else in it. Just send me an email, and then when I finish the presentation, I'll give away a gift card and some other prizes, and I will also be able to email you the slides if you're interested in those. So let's jump right into resilience. Resilience is one of those terms, as I said, that's kind of hard to define. And I looked at different sources in preparing this presentation. A lot of the places that I went, the articles, the papers that I looked at, cite resilience of a supply chain in terms of capacity to resist and their ability to recover. So if they can evade or avoid disruptions and or reduce the time between disruptions, between the disruption onset to containment, and the speed and the ability at which the business can return to full functionality or, return to normal kind of thing after a disruption. So that's what we're looking at. In 2019, PwC said it's not just about playing defense, it's also about playing offense, finding competitive advantages by shaping a supply chain resilience strategy focused on disruption avoidance. And what I find is a lot of companies and a lot of the literature talks about the recovery piece and the aftermath. But what we really should focus on more is avoiding this in the first place and putting processes, plans, strategies in place that help us identify issues before they become very impactful, and thereby really avoiding or diminishing the disruption, the pain that you feel from these different things that happen, because stuff happens. We live in a world where we don't know a lot of things. And, we only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. And we have to be aware of that fact. And we just want to look at different ways that we can actually bounce back. And the quickest way to bounce back is to not have very much of a hit. Don't take too much impact from that. So we're looking at those kinds of things, and we'll talk some more about those. So the speed of recovery is one of these axes that they talk about a lot. And this is an interesting kind of graphic that I pulled from a Michigan State University study. So you can see that they've got their the time series display. So they're looking at the response time, the avoidance time. So there's plenty of time to avoid if you can identify it and look for the warning signs. And then when something happens, in this case, it's that first downturn in that darker blue area, then we want to get it contained as quickly as possible. The faster you can get it contained after some issue does pop up, then the faster you can return to normal. And this is where a lot of companies struggle. They can't get it contained. They just kind of let it. It's not that they allow it to go, but they don't know how to put the boundaries on it and stop the bleeding, stop the get the triage approach where you really get the worst of it identified quickly and get the most pain and the most damage under control. So even if you don't get it resolved, if you can stop more problems from happening, then that's a good thing. So get it contained, get it stabilized, and then how quickly can you get back to, quote, normal, if there is any normal anywhere in the world these days. So when we look at ways that supply chains work that we call resilient, or we observe, or we recognize that this is a pretty good, robust supply chain that is operating in a fairly consistent manner and doesn't get knocked down and brought to a halt when anything happens. So ways we do that are to look at our production and make sure that we're optimizing production with the supply chain planning. So it's again a forward-looking approach that will help businesses anticipate the problems, which will enable you to prepare for various scenarios and again diminish the impacts from disruptions and problems that are inevitable. No business has no disruptions, but it'll improve your overall operations as well. So we want to look at the strategic planning part of that. And then think about what data you have. Data is not information. Data is where we mine the data to get the information. So we want to understand and leverage that data by turning it into information that helps us take actions, make decisions, and make our businesses better. So are we paying attention to what's in the news, on what the competition is doing, your customer feedback and your supplier feedback, looking at what's available, learning and applying these lessons and adapting, improving, and then looking at what new tools there are. I hear so much about artificial intelligence these days. I can't open my email box to see anything but 3 or 4 different articles, webinars, anything on artificial intelligence almost every day. Big data is another one that's out there. Blockchain, we're still hearing a lot about, circular supply chains, all those kinds of things. crypto analysis, but all of those things are good, but how does it really help you, and how can we actually apply those? So we want to take a look at the things that are available and how we can start to apply those, learn about those. We want to make sure we have diversified suppliers, so both diversifying the suppliers and a diversified supply base. Understand our manufacturing partners, monitor them, look for risks through them, make sure you have good open lines of communications, redundancies where possible, and practical in your supply chain. That's important. So for years in supply chain, it was always, how do we get rid of these suppliers? We've got way too many suppliers. So that was a very common goal when I worked with when I worked in the corporate world, and now working with my clients. A lot of them say, we think we have too many suppliers. Well, you might, and there's usually a few suppliers that everyone has in their supply base that are used only occasionally, or just really haven't been cleaned up. You haven't given them any orders in 2 or 3 years. The parts that you used to buy are no longer required. Maybe that product that you made has been obsoleted or replaced by something. So that's a good thing to do, just to clean that up. But the idea that fewer suppliers is best may be a bit outdated, because companies have realized with the pandemic and with other recent events that redundancy in the supply chain is a good thing. Having multiple suppliers, dual locations in a supplier, even if it's the same company, if they have factories in both, say, Mexico and China, it might be good to be in 2 places rather than 1. So you have to see what works for your business. I worked in some businesses that had some pretty high volumes, but I also worked in defense and aerospace, and those volumes are very small, and it's very hard to have redundancy in the supply chain in some of those instances. So what can you do to prevent and to make sure that you stay as resilient and as able to adapt and change and recover as you need to be? And then, when we don't have the ability to be redundant, maybe we can have some capacity or inventory buffers. Just in time, I've had a lot of people tell me, well, just in time, that won't work anymore. We can't do that. And I say, yes, you can, in the right situation. It doesn't apply to everything, but honestly, it never applied to everything. And there were companies who went all out to get their just-in-time inventory and realize that you can be too lean on inventory, just like you can be too fat on inventory. So you want to look at what's just in time, what's just in case, what is your situation? Again, what are your redundancies? Where are your suppliers located? What are your lead times? How critical are these parts? So you can put up your own just-in-time boundaries. It doesn't have to be razor thin inventory levels. It just needs to be what is prudent and economical for you. And we want to always look at costs of holding the inventory versus the cost of a shortage or a major disruption to your business. Because when you start to weigh that in terms of potential cost, and like any risk, we talk about looking at what is the probability of the risk, and then what is the impact in a financial or time impact or resource impactful way. Then if you start to look at and analyze that, then that helps you make the best decision for your business. So resilience works because we have these wheels turning, these gears meshing. And really what we're trying to do is to get a plan that's going to synchronize all of our components. We want to understand the data that we have available and be able to leverage that, turning it into information, again, that helps us assess whether we're on track, helps us understand, are we meeting our goals or not? Are we progressing the way we need to do? Is it the information should help us make decisions, should help us make course corrections, and should help move the business forward. And then again, diversifying suppliers, manufacturing partners, not staying with the same old tried and true. It's good to have those tried and true suppliers. It's great, but sometimes again, we want redundancies, or we want some augmentation to that supplier and those suppliers in our supply pool. And then what can we do about buffers? Where can we put in capacity or inventory buffers, not at the expense of your company exclusively, but can you do that with your suppliers, with your customers, with your 3PLs, whatever your supply chain architecture looks like? Where along that supply chain can you have some buffers and put some risk mitigation in? So we want to remember to look at things from a lot of different perspectives, not just one. And we all tend to do this just because this is what I know. This is my world. I'm going to look at it the way it makes sense to me. But that's why we want to get lots of people looking at this from different perspectives so that we have the best analysis of where we are and can put the best actions in place to do an early warning system, get an early identification program, and then put these mitigation strategies in place. So we want to be able to craft the strategies and the plans and processes so that we can resist, first of all, and then in the event that we lose the resistance part of the war, that we can recover very quickly. So we want to make sure that we're looking to avoid ways to contain when things do happen, ways to get stabilized and then return to normal as quickly as possible. So we're going to look at 4 pillars of resilience. And then I'm going to talk about 5 different aspects. I use that word pillars twice, but we're going to look at 5 different aspects. So let's look at these levels of resilience. In this type of tree, it shows that to be resilient, we have to have, again, both the resistance and the recovery components covered. So to resist, we're going to use avoidance and containment strategies. And then to recover, we're really going to focus on the stabilization and that return to normal kind of thing. So if you look at it in this way, we're looking at our capacity to resist and our capacity to recover. So if we have low, and we're going to look at ourselves from a low to high kind of perspective. So if we're low on the resistance and low in the recovery, that's where we're really the most fragile, and that's the most vulnerable part of our supply chain. So where do we have not much resistance? And that might be that we don't have much control over things. If we're using a supplier's intellectual property, their technology, their expertise more than ours, or if we have low recovery, which means we have sole suppliers, not just single, but sole suppliers, where we have a lot of different challenges, maybe challenging suppliers in that area, which may not make it easy for us to recover. If we have complicated relationships in there where maybe the supplier is both a supplier and a competitor, or a supplier and a customer, or we have things that are in different parts of the world that make them harder to recover from, where we have to, if we're making things like refrigerators and we have to put a lot of inventory on a boat, which isn't quick to recover from, so that can hurt us. So we want to look at those and spend time looking at those really fragile areas and those that we're the most vulnerable. If we have high resistance in an area, but we have low recovery capacity or capability, then we want to look at that from a, we can resist, so that's a good thing. We might not have a high probability of things happening, but if they do happen, it's going to take us some time to recover. Some of these are more of the standard things like fires, floods, tornadoes. We don't, and I'm in Southern California, we have earthquakes here. So we have earthquakes here, but we don't have a lot of severe ones. So our resistance to those is very, very low. We can't resist that. If you're in Florida, you can't resist the possibility of hurricanes. Other parts, of the world. I'm from the Midwest. We had tornadoes, floods, and fires, and we have no floods here in Southern California, but we have fires and fire warnings frequently. So if we are in that area, then we can't do much about the resistance. Then we want to make sure that we beef up the recovery capability and capacity. Business continuity plans, continuation strategies that say, how do we get back up and running if we have a tornado, if that hurricane comes our way next year instead of veering off like it did? So what can we do about that? Then we go to the areas of higher recovery capacity, where we can make that work pretty quickly. So if our resistance capacity is high and our recovery capacity is high, then those are the areas that don't keep us up at night. Those are things that happen. We can't resist them necessarily, but our capacity and capability to deal with that is on the high end. It's the things we know. It's the supplier late delivery. It's the quality problem that you got a load of parts in, you just got 3 lots of parts in, and you find defective parts. So now we have to either get the supplier to replace them very quickly, to sort them and repair them. But we know how to do that because we've done those things before. And then the recovery, we can recover because we can substitute other parts. We've got the ability to switch from one line to another, one product line to another. So those are the areas, again, we don't want to take our eye off that ball, but we don't want to, that's not keeping us up at night. So make sure that we maintain and sustain all of the practices that are keeping us in a position of being able to resist issues in that area and still recover quickly. And then if we have good recovery capacity, but we don't have much resistance capacity, then we have to, again, look at our vulnerability and what we can do. So if we have low resistance capacity, again, that goes back to natural disasters, pandemics, things that we really can't predict very well and that we don't have a lot of control over doing. Things that are done, political ramifications, the war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that caused a lot of consternation in the areas of wheat manufacturing, sunflower oil extraction. Some of the businesses that were doing business in the Ukraine, they did a lot of software call centers and things like that. So you can't do that. What's going on now with Hamas and Israel, if you have a business there, your ability to resist that was pretty low, but now how can you recover? So if you have redundancies in your manufacturing, redundancies in your suppliers, redundancies in your strategies for that, then you can recover more quickly and your recovery capacity can be on the high end, which is really where you want to be. Acknowledge those vulnerabilities, but if you can put mitigation activities in place, or at least have something in your hip pocket that says, if this happens, then I have a path forward, then that makes life a lot easier for you and for your staff and everyone around you. So those are important things to do. These 4 pillars of resilience, the first one is agility. So how quick can we be to make changes when we see changes and fluctuations in demand, or when this constraints to our supply either get clamped down or come off. There are times when we, for example, the chip shortages we've been experiencing, that was kind of a quick blow, sudden impact to a lot of businesses. We're getting toward the end of the first year. I can't believe I'm saying first year of the almost 4 years now of the COVID that we've been dealing with. But if you were thinking you could get back up and running, maybe the vaccines were coming out, you were thinking that the worst was over, which I don't really think it was, but hindsight is a better judge than foresight. But if you were looking at that and all of a sudden your business was constrained by, I can't get chips, I can't get parts, I don't know what happened to all of this. So how quickly you were able to figure out a way around that or to work with that. And then vice versa, when all of a sudden that it's like, oh, that's not a problem. Now these parts that I haven't been able to get for 2 years are suddenly available. And sometimes the hoarding that was going on now makes them very much available. So and now I have to decide what's good. Are these genuine parts? Are they authentic? Do I have to do extra testing or whatever? So the supply strains can either come quickly on down and shut things down, or they can open up suddenly that, oh, we got some other players in this market, or whatever was constraining their production. Maybe it was a new part that was coming off the line. They got their wheels going up and running, and now there's no supply constraints. Think about Tesla and their Model 3s. When they first came out, they could not make them fast enough. If there were people wanting them, you paid your money and you had to wait sometimes up to 2 years to get your car delivered. And now all of a sudden they seem to have their supply constraints figured out, and they're able to make cars, and there's actually cars available with little to no waiting, standard kind of waiting times that you would put in an order for a Tesla. So be able to react quickly either way. Where is the issue in the supply chain? And again, where can you put in some redundancies, some buffers, some risk mitigation to make sure that if something happens, that it doesn't reverberate and exacerbate up and down? We all know the bullwhip effect, where we start with the customer end and the fluctuations, but what we don't want is one of the 2-tier or 3rd-tier suppliers to shut down. And then all of a sudden the 3rd-tier supplier has the problem. Now the tier 2 supplier is not getting parts. So they can't ship to the tier 1 supplier, and they can't ship to me, and I can't ship to my customers or to the distributors or to the retailers. And all of that's grinding to a halt. So it's kind of a reverse bullwhip, but we want to say, where can we help ourselves throughout the supply chain? And again, it's not one organization's responsibility to do that. We want to look at those redundancies and those buffers anywhere that they make sense throughout the network to expand our network and make us more resilient and more able to recover. What is going on in the world of sustainability? So we want to try to reduce waste, but we don't want to try to reduce the good. We want to cut the fat, but not the lean. We want to keep the good parts of our processes. And still, we want to look at the environmental impacts, because whether you agree with that or not, the trend is that there is going to be more and more scrutiny, more and more requirements, more and more measurements of environmental impact. And it's going to be around the world. We're starting that here heavily in the United States. And I recognize that we are much in the lead of many countries. Countries like India and China, even Taiwan, don't have anywhere near the same kinds of compliance restrictions and environmental rules and guidelines, but they are coming. We need to do that as a planet to be good stewards, and we need to do that because we know it's the right thing to do. Even if you disagree with the extent of the reporting and whatever, and don't think it's as bad as they're making it, it's not getting better if we don't do anything different. So we need to just recognize that and continue to work on improving that. And then, of course, we want a culture in the workplace where we have workers that feel safe, that are open about talking about what's ways to improve. So that means you have to talk about what's wrong or what's not working in order to be able to address it, get those things out in the open, encourage people to make suggestions, make changes where it's reasonable, or make recommendations for changes so that we can make our business better. 86% of retail executives in a recent study ranked compensation and safety as both top priorities. So we know there's been a lot of strikes with the UAW, the Writers Guild, the SAG-AFTRA, and there's other smaller ones going on. There's potential ones going on. I was recently, I am part of a teachers union in here in Southern California, but it's a statewide thing. And so their contract is coming up, and we're getting asked to vote. Do we want to strike or not, or whatever? So it's a lot of different businesses. We've seen the UAW issues, and those UAW issues now are going to translate into the non-union automobile manufacturers like Honda and Mazda and Toyota. And we're already seeing them respond and trying to give workers similar increased benefits. We've seen Starbucks go back and forth, Amazon back and forth between unionizing and not. And I think that's going to continue. So you want your workplace to be safe, and you want the compensation to be good, because those things can be really drains on your ability to recover and to avoid issues. Those are big impacts in those areas. So vulnerability is one of the 5 aspects that I identified through the research. And, where are your bottlenecks? Where are you having quality issues? Are you tracking that by product, by supplier, by workstation, by type of process that you're doing? You have to look at those, not just, oh, we had a quality issue, but where are we having those? What are the trends around that? Is there any correlation there that might raise a flag that says, oh, I can go work on this. We should go work on this to reduce this overall. So a lot of places look at just the quality incidents and say, oh, we had this many of this type of reject. But what are there any commonalities there? Like I say, around the same product, around the same part, around the same supplier, around the same area in your space? Where are the quality issues and what's happening with that? Any demand shocks? So again, sudden increasing of suppliers or not. So how do we do this? Customer complaints, we always listen to that, but I also say listen to the feedback, and I should add that to the slide. Listen to the feedback from your suppliers. Many companies are very much attuned to their customer relationship management, but they are not nearly as attuned to their supplier relationship management and their supplier risk. And we need to do both as a company that's really trying to improve. So customer complaints are good. Supplier suggestions are good. All of that will make some of these issues more transparent. And when you have transparent issues, it reduces your vulnerability, because you do see those. And when you see them, you can start to deal with them. So where is your productivity? Are you tracking productivity? Maybe you should track it more than one way. Is it increasing? Is it at least stable? And then again, what are your disruptions around imports, exports, deliveries, quality, any of those kinds of things? So that's where we want to look. And then the management culture. So again, this topic of resilience has increased within organizations about 44%, according to this study that I mentioned before that I was looking at, and 41% in at least some parts of the organization. So supply chain resilience is 33% of top managers rank that as high, 27 very high. So, that's a combined 60%, and that's a huge number. So, and it's growing every time they put resilience on, or agility or things like that on surveys of these top managers, its numbers are increasing. And so 85% of companies said that this topic increased, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's, gets to pretty close to 100, because companies are feeling this and they want to be able to deal with it. A couple other the aspects of resilience is procurement. So one study found that about 90% of companies dual sourced raw materials. 72% performed some kind of supplier audit, and almost 50% rated suppliers in some kind of fashion. About 40%, though, rated only key suppliers, and less than 10% did not rate suppliers at all. What I find is that I think those numbers are a little high. I see a lot of companies who don't rate suppliers very much, and it's telling that 40% rate only key suppliers. I remember one time working with an organization that spent a lot of time putting together some automation around reports that around the quality, the rejects, the receipts and the rejects. And so they had done this, and they were showing this group of us, we were all in this professional capacity looking at this. They were very proud of what they'd done. And so they told us, what it took to get these reports. We had to pull data from here. We had to do this. But then the question came up, what do you do with that? Do you rank these suppliers? Do you, we send these suppliers weekly reports. Okay, but do you accumulate that so that you can say over the past quarter, you've had this? Do you rank them as to who your biggest offenders are? And the answer was really no. We give the information to the suppliers and we expect them to do something. And in my experience, if you don't sit down and review that information with them, go through what's working, what's not, tell them and hold them accountable, then they'll pretty soon, they might get a little upset or worried the first couple times they get a report. But if it's never mentioned, if it's never followed up on, if there's no consequences and no at least additional discussion, then they're going to quit worrying about it. They'll just get that report and it'll go right to the junk or right to a file in their email. And oh, it's there in case I need it, but I'm not going to look at it every week, because if nobody's asking me about it, if nobody's asking me what I'm doing about it, then I'm not going to worry about it, because I have 75 other things to worry about. So procurement is a good place to start. And operations by itself, in operations, about 78% of companies dual or multiple source. 10 or 15% keep between 20 and 40 days of inventory, or they have what they have described as agile capacity, which means they can switch production types very quickly. Yet only 29% of the companies that they surveyed said they have successfully aligned the 3 mitigation strategies successfully. And they track lead time and cycle times and reductions, as well as the use of overtime and the percent of the workforce that is subcontractors versus full-time. So there's a lot of different ways we can do that with multiple sourcing to help resilience, keeping some inventory, keeping our processes and switching from process A to process B pretty quick. But companies, and these things are difficult. If they were easy, everyone would do them. So you have to think about, what can your company do? How can you get that set up? And watch these things. Watch your overtime. A lot of companies track overtime. A lot of companies do not track as closely their lead time. They might track their cycle time on certain issues, on certain products, but lead time, not so much. And if they do, maybe it's lead time to customers and not lead time from suppliers, which we know since the pandemic have grown sometimes almost exponentially. So what are you tracking? Is it serving you well? Is it telling you what you need to know soon enough to be prepared for these things? And then finally, the overall demand and visibility. So we're looking at visibility into stock to prevent stock outs, looking into your distribution partners. How are they doing and how are they managing my stuff? Look at our customers, look at our costs that are both internal and the things that are costing us an impact or causing us an impact to customers. 80% of the companies indicated they had high or medium visibility on stockouts, but only 40% of those companies have that same level of visibility into their distribution partners, and 25% have that level of visibility into their customers. 22% say they have full visibility into costs for customers caused by stockouts. So these numbers that are under 50% means there's a lot of opportunity there. If 40% of companies have visibility into their distribution partners, that means 60% do not. And so what are you missing? What is it that you don't know that might bite you next week or next month? So we want to build these aspects into our supply chain. So here's some steps you can take to build a resilient supply chain. Look at your processes. What kinds of processes do you have for forecasting, managing your inventory, actively managing supplier relationships, as well as sourcing and commodity? We are looking at, what real-time analytics and tools are there to help you with your MRP, ERP type things. And just if you're managing on spreadsheets, that's fine, but do you still have processes, and can you use some tools and reports that pull from that to tell you what's working and what's not? So we want to look at where do you want to invest your money, your time, and are you doing an analysis in spend? Probably, but not maybe as much into the risk or the relationships of both supplier and customer aspects. So we want to look at people. So the people, do we have the right people in the right places to perform these tasks? If we have people who are not trained or not exposed, not understanding, we need to get them, excuse me, get them the insights and the skills and the tools that they need to do that. It's always important to supplement existing talent, and don't put people in boxes. Engineers are great people to work in supply chain organizations. So are people with marketing backgrounds, finance backgrounds, and it's good to put them in other organizations as well. When you put financial people working with engineers, then you get them a lot more cost conscious. If you put marketing people working with engineers and finance people, you get a different perspective. So put that talent, share that talent amongst your different organizations, because that helps define the dynamics of the organization. In purchasing supply chain, you want to look at commodity management and these supplier relationships and risk management. Are you doing surveys with your key suppliers? Do you know where their risks are? Are you asking questions about changes in their business that will help you identify the possible problems before they get to be really bad problems or impacting your company? And then look at the technology. We have a lot of tools. We have a lot of things that we can use. So look at what needs to be done there and what's going to be applicable. There's a lot of companies now selling a lot of software to, oh, we'll manage this, we'll manage that, we'll manage your risk through this. That's all good. And some of those are very good, but they also require looking at the context of your business. Anything that comes from a cookie cutter off the shelf company, think about it in terms of if you've ever used Oracle, SAP, any of these other Deltek systems, Sage, any of these systems, they're all good and they all need to be put into the context of the business, because they don't work very simply. You don't just obtain it, throw some data at it, turn it on, and it all works. There's so many nuances. So look at all of these tools in terms of what you have and what's working for you. And then make sure you define what kind of resilience you want, where it's going to be, how you're going to measure it, how you're going to assess that. So look at the risks and the risk factors. Be honest about your capabilities and your capacity and how you can leverage your strengths and shore up your weaknesses. The time to survive refers really to the amount of time it takes for your business to resume your supply chain operation after the disruption. For some factories in China, it took about 3 weeks after the initial COVID outbreaks. And that's about how long it took to secure necessary personal protective equipment and get some safety regulations, etc. Get the government clearance and reopen. Others took way longer than that, and people were really hurting in the meantime. The time to recover is the time it takes you to recover all the backlog and get rid of any of the back orders you had to take, or reduce your overtime from what it was, quit expediting shipments to into your factory and out to your customers. So Chinese factories in some cases were able to function again in less than a month, but they were running at a fraction of their normal capacity because of lost time, lack of workers, and therefore it took 3 or 4 months to recover the backlogs. So this is from a study that I looked at in China, but we had the same thing here in the United States and all over the world. You could recover certain pieces of it quickly, and then others, it took a lot longer to finally get back up to where you need to be. So the time to thrive is the third one on there that says its evaluation is if the company, after it's emerged from that crisis, what does it look like? Is it better? Is it as robust, or are we still hurting a little bit? So the question they ask is, are we stronger now because of what happened? And did we learn from that so that we put things in place? Or is it just that, oh, whew, that's over and we don't have to deal with that, so please don't let that happen again? As one of my favorite bosses used to say, hope is not a plan. So if you're not taking into heart what's happened in the last few years, all over the world, not just the pandemic, but everything else, then you should be paying attention, and just hoping that it won't come to you is not a plan. I recently got COVID for the first time. I have vaccinations. I have this. I've been wearing masks, doing all these things. And I had what I thought was a cold. I was just kind of suffering and complaining. And it was on the weekend, and I talked to my sister and I talked to a friend, and they both said, you need to take a COVID test. And I was like, no, I don't have it. I've done all these things. I really haven't been uncareful about where I've been exposed. And guess what? I took the test, and it was about as positive as, it just was like a flare going off. That as soon as that liquid hit that test, it started showing positive. So we don't know. And what we really want to say is, now, am I stronger? Am I better having gone through that? I'm a little more careful. I'm a little more diligent. I thought I was being pretty good, but you can still get caught. So we want to say, look at these things, put our processes in place, develop our continuity plans, our succession plans, do all these things, and then consider these three aspects: the time to survive, the time to recover, and the time to thrive. Some common characteristics of supply chains that are considered resilient, just to kind of review these: end-to-end visibility. So if you're not looking down at your tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, you're inviting risk. And if you're not looking at your final customer, then you're not assessing all the information that's available. Look at vulnerability, define that word. This is a word we don't like to talk about because it makes us feel like, oh, now I'm exposed. Now I'm vulnerable. Guess what? We all are to a certain extent. And the more that you recognize that and address it up front, the better you're going to be able to recover and get back to that state of normal or beyond, where you want to be improved. So look at the regular tests, whether that's risk analysis, whether that's surveys that you do, however you're assessing that. Don't let up on the risk, and keep training people, keep reinforcing those things. Make sure that your agendas include the resilience and efficiency, because you're trying to balance those out. You could put lots of money and effort and resources into resilience, but it's not going to be very efficient, because you're going to be spending a lot of money just in case. And if most companies don't have that. I've never seen a company that has more resources that they need, whether it's people or time or money or whatever other resource you have. Every company is trying to run with the smallest amount of resources they can to be successful. Look at metrics so that you can balance those things. And again, what's cost, what's growth, and then what's resilience? Where do those go? What's my priority? Where am I trying to build in more improvements into my company? Make sure you've got tools and people trained to use those tools, and that they are employing those tools. Doesn't do any good if you have great risk management strategies, but nobody's applying them. Governance processes are helpful, and then enforcement across the supply chain is very important. Bring in your suppliers. They can give you a whole world of information, give you a whole nother perspective on how you can make your whole supply chain more resilient, because they'll tell you about their supplier challenges as well, and give you ideas on how to strengthen that. So we can improve operational efficiency. We can get shorter development cycles. We can improve our capacities and our capabilities. It's possible to get higher productivity. 93% of supply chain leaders said they were investing in resilience strategies in 2020, and you can bet they're still doing that in 2023 and in 2024. Bain and Company did a study where they reported that companies investing in supply chain resilience saw product development cycles reduced up to 60%, and their output was increased by up to 25%. So these studies are being done all the time. They're a couple years behind because it takes them a while to process all that data, but that's still applicable. So we can reduce risks. If we reduce risks, we're going to help ourselves out. We're going to save money in the long run, and we're going to be able to keep our resources focused on the things that are driving the business, not on the things that happen all around us. We're going to get customer satisfaction increases, market share increases, and again, that's going to drive back more revenue into the company, which makes more revenue available throughout the company. And it's going to help your business survive. So if you want to survive, these are the things you can do. So I'll take questions now and whatever, but I'm going to give you one last chance. I see some things in the chat about putting in, did I put my, yeah. So people that have put in their names sent me emails to get their drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the slides. If you want the slides, you're going to need to make sure that I have your contact information. So put your, send me an email to that jane@purplelink.co, and I'm going to give you an Amazon card. So if you win, I'll ask you if you want the same email address for the Amazon card, because that's how I do it. And you'll get signed up for my dynamic dialogue webinars, which are once a month. They're about this length and about an hour, and you can listen to them. I tape them and send them out later, so you can listen to them at your leisure. And I also have a whole library of things that you are welcome to. Once you get the link, you can go in and look at other different topics if you're interested. So some of the things that are going on at Purple Link World these days, I'm doing a CPSM class starting in January. Anybody who's interested, I always say if you start in January, you can have your CPSM by the end of 2024. If you're looking for goals and you want to do that, get that certification. If you say, I've thought about that for a while, I'm not sure, but that's what I want to do, then please sign up. These are online classes. They're an hour and a half a week, so they're not terribly onerous. I do them, again, virtually, so they're easy to do. They're taped. If you can't make one, you can just listen to it at your leisure. I give you some study materials, lots of slides, lots of practice tests and all that kind of stuff. So you sign up. Compliance, every organization, we're going to do a workshop in Q1. I've got a colleague that we're going to do that in tandem, so wait for more on that. And then Lean and Six Sigma for supply chains. This is an area where, again, companies say, well, I don't think we can be lean. And I say, I don't think you can afford to not be lean, but you don't have to be bare bones. So I'm looking one last time, about another 20 seconds to send me an email. I think everybody got one that sent one. Let's see. So the winner is going to be let's see. One just popped in, so I have to count again. Yeah, the winner is going to be SC Fry. So is that
Sherry? That's Sherry.
Are you still on, Sherry?
Yes, she is.
Okay, that's great. So you used an email to send to me. If you want the gift card sent to a different email, you'll need to send me another email with a different email address. And I'll take questions, comments. Anybody?
If anybody has any questions, please put it in the chat. If you would like to ask your question live, just make sure you raise your hand so we know who you are and we can have you speak live. Otherwise, you could always put your, oh, we do have a question. Thanks,
Okay.
Thanks, Jeffrey. How do you suggest managing your suppliers, the tier 1 and tier 2?
Well, jointly with your tier 1 suppliers. And sometimes you have directed sources like go use this chip. So you ask your supplier to go buy that chip from the manufacturer. But if you need to get inserted, you can have regular business reviews quarterly, every 6 months, annually. If they're that critical, I wouldn't leave it annually at this point. I would do at least every 6 months. And, you can ask your tier 1 supplier to set it up, or you can set it up and have them involved. It's good to set up a rotation plan if you've got any travel budget at all, which is to go to the different plants and see what's going on, kick the tires and let people meet more of the team that's there than you generally have tied up in some of these meetings. It's always good for me to go to a supplier and actually see what's going on there, because I can tell a lot just by walking around and seeing what kind of activity is there, what kind of cleanliness is there, talk to different people again than you just normally get to talk to in meetings.
Thank you. Jeffrey did put one more comment, and then I need to go down to tier N.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep peeling that onion, right? Now, I had a supplier who found out that they did a big sourcing project, and they had, it was a chemical thing, and they picked a supplier. And then a few months later, that supplier said, I can't get this material. So I can't help. And they said, oh, we just did the sourcing plan. Let's go find one of these other ones. So they went back to the supplier that had finished second in their sourcing selection. And they said, hey, we'd like to give you some business too, because now we have this. And they said, we can't really help you, and did this and that and the other. And at the end of the day, they found out that everybody that had been in that sourcing activity was getting this one chemical from one plant in China that had a very severe fire and brought them all to their knees. So you need to peel that onion and find those things out.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't see any more questions in our chat, but we only have about a minute or two left. But I want to thank everybody today for joining us. And I want to thank Jane for bringing this topic, which actually I've been seeing a lot more out there on it. People are starting to talk more and more about resilient constantly now. So I'm glad we were able to bring this topic to our ISM community. Thank you, Jane. Any closing comments before we end today?
No, I always like to leave with a strive to thrive slide. This one, makes me think about the things, the Maui fires that were so devastating, and there's a lot of work that has to come back from that. We had a hurricane here in Southern California, which was the first time in, I can't remember how many years. It's crazy. There's other things going on, and yet, nature finds a way sometimes to do this. So I think this is a good thing that, a little daisy can survive in what looks like a lot of lava flows if the conditions are right and somebody maybe nurtures it just a teeny bit. So a lot of things are possible. And in honor of the survivors of many parts of the world that are experiencing horrible things, I think it's good to think about them and think about survival.
Thank you. And thank you for those.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We appreciate it. And again, thank you for coming to do this particular topic with us today. Okay, everybody, we're going to close off the webinar at this point, and have a great day, everybody.